My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era. Today, I'm with Sumu Sathi, and she is a blast from the past because she's a fellow Wilburnite, growing up in Scarborough. So Sumu has been doing amazing stuff. She's an award-winning social advocate, plus-size model, and actor. She's a labor relations specialist in the labor movement, and she was previously chair at CUPE 905. And this is a long bio. Like I said, she's been doing a lot of amazing stuff. So she's been represented almost 4,000 public servants, and she was a co-founder of BIPOC Collective Human Rights Committee with CUPE 905. She's also been in the media space. I know some of you might have recognized her from her work there as well, and community leadership space for almost 20 years. Her community work has been featured in places like Toronto.com, Now Toronto, the Toronto Star. She's also the recipient of the Inclusion Excellence Award from the UofT. She also holds 2 undergraduate degrees, and I think she just finished her master's. I know when we first talked, she was pursuing. Is that correct, Sumu?
No, I just started my master's this
Okay,
September.
then she's pursuing it. Then I got that wrong. And Sumu has also acted in 2 Toronto-based films, has appeared on CityTV as a plus-size model. She believes in promoting body positivity and advocating for representation for people of color in arts, fashion, and media spaces. So, Sumu, I hope we did you justice with that very long bio. So thank you for jumping on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to this interview.
Awesome. Well, for me, as just like your brother, like I'm a dad. So for me, my fascination is always, hey, what are some decisions or things that happened when you were kind of younger, like in your childhood, formative teenage years, that really got you to kind of becoming passionate about all these multiple career paths that you've been kind of exploring in as a social advocate, as a plus size model and actor? Like, what really in your childhood helped kind of spark this interest in exploring careers in like parallel, essentially?
Yeah, so I came to Canada when I was 14. While I was in Sri Lanka, I was born and raised in Colombo and then moved to Scarborough. My dad came here as a refugee. My parents are survivors of the 1983 riots. It was getting really, really bad for us, and in terms of like for many Tamil people, or probably for the entire Tamil Canadian community diaspora that has fled the war, right? I was always in the arts spaces. Like I loved acting, like in theater, singing and dancing. But however, I guess my parents always said you're going to be a doctor. So it was already set that at the age of 6. I come here and I grew up in Tuxedo Court, exposed to a lot of gang violence, and hung out with people that were involved in gangs. Somehow made it to UofT to do my undergrad, don't know how. And that sort of kind of shifted me, I guess, my experiences to be like, do I really want to be a doctor, or am I mostly interested in community? Because I was still interested in the arts, art spaces, at the same time seeing the violence and what my friends were going through and what I was going through, and the lack of support systems that was in place for immigrant or refugee teenagers or people of color, sort of made me dive deeper into social work. So I did graduate with a Bachelor of Science degree from UofT, and then decided to go into social work. Broke my parents' heart because they were like, where is this going? Am I going to be volunteering for the rest of my life? Because that's what, like, sort of like the label on social work. And then I just kind of, after 10 years of being in the industry, is when I decided I'm going to go get my undergrad in Bachelor of Social Work. And then now I'm doing my master's. So my journey was sort of like reversed. Went into the field and then decided, this is where I'm going to do education. But my experiences growing up in Scarborough as a refugee youth definitely did influence those decisions.
Even though your parents
Yeah.
thought that the path you took was not the right one, I actually, like, looking at my kids, I think that's like the best way to go, because when you think about it, most people jump from like high school into like going to school, whether it's college or university, and kind of making a guess based on like some little experience they have in school of what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And I'm sure you know lots of people that went to school for something and did something completely different. And school's not cheap, especially now. So
Yeah.
taking tens of thousands of dollars in student loans, I think what you did is the best strategy. I'm always a fan of testing something and actually seeing, is there some kind of possibility here? Because I had a friend who wanted to do like med school and he was convinced he wanted to do med school. And then he volunteered as like a doctor, like at a hospital, and he realized he can't stand the sight of blood, poo, like all the things you're going to be exposed to as a
Yeah.
doctor. So then he kind of pivoted to like something else altogether. So uh first of all, I think like what you did was smart. I think obviously it's against the grain because it's not the
Yeah.
typical path of, hey, do your high school, go to undergraduate, do something else after, get a job. So I think that's amazing. Second of all, I guess in terms of like growing up in like Woburn, I think a lot of people, like I guess someone like my age would kind of, I was kind of there around that time. But I think
Mhm.
for people that are kind of attending now, it might not be Tamils. I think there's other groups that are kind of, new immigrants that have kind of fallen into the cycle of kind of gang violence and things like that. But at that time, when we were there, it was Tamils like us.
Yeah.
Uh, so like, what kind of things did you see? And like, I mean, I don't know if it's a question you can answer, but like, why do you think so many Tamils at that point, especially living at
Yeah.
Tuxedo Court, be kind of got caught up in kind of that gang violence during that time?
So I think it was a sense of belonging. I think there were individuals that were exposed to violence and also didn't know, how that impacted their mental health. And we watched that when we were growing up, right? And that's all you watch, in terms of like the killings and the war and the violence. And that sort of becomes the answer to like, for I'm going to ask my rights for my rights through violence, or I'm going to resolve a conflict through violence, and the whole land of like holding on to turf, right? This is my turf, that's your turf, and then sort of finding that sense of belonging. And I think that they and they're your friends. So I know, like on TV, people would see them as criminals and all of this stuff, but these are people that you grow up with, and then you kind of have a soft spot for them, right? And I think seeing people like my friends who went to jail, lost their futures or got deported, or people that actually were killed, right? And so I think like those kind of things. And I dated somebody from a gang for like 8 years. Like, so being labeled as a gangster's girlfriend, and from like the age of 17 to 25, like your 8 years is gone right there. But however, the things that I was exposed to and just kind of coming out of that circle, and and then when you try to come out of it, then you're called a traitor. And also, again, being attracted to a similar type of personalities again and again, and that's toxic masculinity, right? And but going into social work sort of made me unpack that. So I would say I'm considered as one of the privileged ones because I had access to these like resources and books, and a community of social workers that could sort of like became my support system. But there are many women like me that who lost their boyfriends to gang violence, my friends who are married to reformed gangsters, I would say right now. And I think that mental health impact, and then that trauma is still carried into their lives, right? So I think it's something I applaud you for asking that question, because many people don't want to know the answer, because it's a time that we don't want to talk about because we didn't know how to deal with it, and we carry a lot of shame around it, right? Like the way that we were displayed in newspapers and medias and stuff like that. But nobody also talks about the women and the girls that who were involved in the and associated with the gangs.
This might be like a very extreme example, but like, people talk about Pablo Escobar because of Narcos. It became very popular. The show humanized him where he's likable, but obviously in real life, he did a lot of terrible things and like
Yeah.
was responsible for like murder and like just a lot of bad things in general. But if you watch the show, it talks about why he became who he did, like who he is. And it's similar to kind of what you're talking about. Like everybody that came here, they had their own journey of kind of leaving a country that was experiencing a lot of violence, crossing into a new place where they had no kind of, especially the males, like male figures to kind of look up to because
Yep.
everyone they knew was either like dead or like just wasn't able to kind of join them on the journey. So they were kind of looking to each other, which obviously is not ideal recipe for success too. So no, that's I think thank you for sharing that. I want to kind of ask as well. I know that you know, like I said, you've had multiple careers. I'll start at the kind of, you know, one of the earlier ones, which is you are the first woman and person of color to take a chair position with CUPE 905, the union. How did you, I guess, get this opportunity? And like, what was your like role? Like, what does a chair do?
So I think it was very unexpected. Again, as like, you know, these careers that I have chosen in my life, it was not something that I planned. It happened during the pandemic. The union was under a white man for 20 years. But I think the pandemic and the killing of George Floyd definitely did push for some systemic changes that our colonial systems needed. And I think it was an uprising of a movement that came from social services, social workers, frontline workers that have that were providing services to individuals that were impacted by the pandemic, didn't see their leadership reflecting them. And also the Black, Indigenous, and people of color wanted to address the racism in the workplace and also in the labor movement. And they didn't see they didn't hear the voice or see the face that they needed to lead them. So it started as, you know, me entering the space to do anti-racism work, just to sort of asking what is the labor movement's stance on, you know, response to like anti-Black racism and systemic racism. And then eventually it became as co-founding the Black, Indigenous, people of color. And I would say I was chosen by the people. And you know, there's something that we say in racial justice is that for one of us to win, hundreds of us have to fight. But in my case, it was thousands that had to fight. And so it was not a position that I wanted. You know, I wanted to sort of lead it to where I open up the space for another racialized person to run. However, it just took a different turn where members said, you know, we want to nominate you for this position and we want you to accept it because we need this type of leadership at this time. So I think a big lesson from that is that a leader never calls themselves, oh, like I'm a leader. It's almost like you're chosen and, you know, the people actually have to call you as their leader. And I think like I saw that and it was also a testing moment for me to say, listen, you talk all this talk about social advocacy and people, you know, pushing for change, stepping up and doing all of this stuff. And I'm very outspoken, you know that, you've known me for years. But it came to a point like, am I going to step in and do this? Right. So I think like I sort of had to hold myself accountable as well and say, you know what, I led these people to this point and this is not where I leave them. I don't abandon them. So I became the first person of color. I ran again and I was elected again into that position. It was hard for the system to see a woman from a refugee community become their leader because it's not something that our systems are used to. And also the way that I lead, it was rooted in our Tamil struggle, our resilience, and the way we, function as a community, which is like, you know, we wake up and we still fight and we still move forward. So it was something very different for the system to see because they usually read and watch these in movies, but now this is actually happening. So I think like I definitely have to like, you know, thank my identity and like where I come from in terms of like, understanding our struggle and what our people like went through or still going through to say, you know what, here is my moment to create that change. And I need to sort of step in and take that.
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me. So what kind of change were you able to make? And like, was there anything that you wanted to do that you weren't able to do? And like, what was your takeaway from that experience?
So because I entered with, doing racial justice work and advocating for equity-seeking groups that usually did not get representation. So for example, people who experience sexual violence or sexual harassment or gender violence or racism in the workplace, those were not seen as workplace issues. So workplace issues like labor movements originally started as construction trades that were involved in it, so very male dominated. So they didn't see these issues as workplace issues until somebody who had the lived experience came in and said, no, these are actually human right violations. they are an issue like everywhere, right? So sort of like kind of waking up the employer and waking up the labor movement and saying it's time for you to change, because if not, you're going to be called out in a public space, and we need to make these changes in these systems. So co-founding joint committees, because I did believe in a collaborative work, and also running an executive team of 10 executive board members from different we have subunits from paramedic services, long-term care workers, social services, transportation, environment. So any public, these were 4,000 public servants, and they all had their own vice president. And then I was the chair, vice chair. So I was the chair. So like kind of building that board and building leadership, and implementing stewards who are union reps on the floor to kind of keep an eye, right? So racial equity and wellness, like what I would say, like committees with the human resources departments. So kind of working collaboratively with the government to create those safe working spaces.
And like, what was your whole, like, what was the takeaway from the experience? Like, is this like something you would like look to do again in the future? Or was this like just like a great learning experience that you kind of made the impact you were hoping to make? You got what you were hoping to kind of get from a learning perspective, and kind of that's it?
So I think the requests came for me to run for politics, because that's the next step for mostly for union leaders, because these are political spaces. However, my heart is not there. And after 13 years of service in the government, I did leave last year, about like 8 months ago. I was recruited by another labor movement that saw my journey. And I represent unionized workers all over Canada right now. I'm not mentioning the employer because of the delicate nature of the work, such as representing, members who are experiencing racism and sexual violence and, human rights issues, and also for safety for me as well, because when you're addressing these things, it doesn't really sit well with individuals who have different perspectives. So that comes across as threats, and it creates unsafe working conditions for the members that I represent, or even for myself. But those are some of the learning experience as well, like, in terms of how to protect yourself and how to protect the members you're representing. I'm still in the labor movement. So it did definitely open the door for me to realize that, this is a space that I can thrive in. So that was the takeaway. It ended up in a huge win of me getting into this position right now.
Yeah, because you mentioned like I've heard of many incidents of like racism in the workplace, but you've mentioned like several times sexual violence in workplaces. For me, I guess I just can't imagine that, but like sounds like you kind of deal with this a lot. I mean, without going into details, does this involve kind of power dynamics between bosses and like employees and things like
Yep.
that?
Yeah, it could be like employee to employee, or
Oh,
it could be, boss to employee. Like, for example, just an example, just saying a certain, maybe a male dominated industry that has very few women who are working in certain positions. So there, like, those type of issues will come up as well. And I guess that's where, you have to be sort of come in as a labor relations specialist and look at, like, how to support those members. And on top of that, like, wrongful terminations, like members being treated poorly, toxic work conditions, representing members when they're being disciplined. And also just working with the employer to, be there and to kind of help them create safe working spaces. And I guess that's where, I mean, when you talk about union, you talk about CUPE, you see the union power and what they're able to achieve. So we do, that definitely is there, but I think it comes from building relationships, because it is a human that is sitting on the other side of the table. And I do have a portfolio where I represent members that work in political parties and in the government sector. And so that becomes very delicate, because you're sitting across a provincial and municipal government negotiating wages and safe working conditions for your members, right? So it can get contentious as well.
you talked about like the core of who you are is kind of the social advocacy work and like the social work you do, but you kind of, I think you do it in different mediums. So like, we talked about what you did with kind of, as a labor movement leader, and you still do that today. But you also kind of did it in film as well, and you acted in a couple of films. Naiga, is that one of them? Nioga,
Nioga.
Nioga, and
Yeah.
Guardian, and they're both I think won an award at the International Film Festival in Jakarta. Um, I guess number one, how does the work you do on these films tie into kind of that identity piece in you, which is, you know, like the social worker? And then like how did you get these opportunities?
Mm-hmm. So I just want to tell everybody that I did not land the films randomly. There is a separate career that I've been working on from the age of 6, I would say, but it was not really fostered or supported by immediate family, because no one in the South Asian community thinks that you want your child to be an artist. They all want you to be a doctor, engineer, teacher, accountant, IT, like, you know. So I think it's something that I couldn't give up. It started with theater plays, cultural shows, dance competitions, becoming a dance instructor, theater plays, and Arangardal produced by Manavali Productions. I used to be a theater actress in Toronto and also went to England as well. So I speak Tamil fluently. Then which went into being a TV host for Tamil Entertainment Television and as a producer. And then having my own production company, Mandra TV. Then I had a couple of podcasts as well during during the pandemic, which sort of like kind of led me to be like, okay, so what's next? Which went into plus size modeling, and also saying, okay, listen, now theater acting is now, Manavali is not doing those theater anymore. So what do I want to do next? So going to acting classes and auditioning for Niyoga and getting like one of the lead roles in that. I think like that role is a role that focuses on feminism in a Tamil household, and addresses some very delicate issues that women face, and also then kind of auditioning for the social worker role in the Toronto film The Guardian, and both are women-focused films. And for me, I guess like I feel like media is a very powerful uh, tool for storytelling, and I think through media you can reach many people from different walks of life, because not everyone speaks the social advocacy language. And if I come in there guns blazing saying colonialism, white supremacy, intersectional feminism, right, you know, tokenism, people are going to be like, oh, I don't want to hear this, this is too intense. However, when you break it down and give it in an art form, it is more accessible by people. And I think this is where we can kind of think differently in terms of how we can educate people through art. So I think that's where it's tied in. I am with an agency now that is an actor recognized agency. So I do take acting classes. It's not fully advertised because it's a journey that's happening behind the scenes. And sort of there's a lot of hard work and preparation that goes into it. And I think when people see media, acting, and like TV hosting, all of that, people think about the fame and like, you know, it's all glamorous, but people don't understand like the hard work that really goes behind it. But I feel like social work has given me the tools and like the grounding principles to understand, you know, which projects I want to take and how do I want to manage my stress and how do I manage my day, and not time management, but energy management as well, right? And all those kind of things which have kind of tied in together.
Yeah, actually, well, my best friend and his brother are both actors, and same thing, like a long journey. He was supposed to be an engineer. He dropped out to do acting. Obviously, didn't go well initially, but then
Yeah.
once they saw him on TV and people recognized him, then all of a
Mhm.
sudden, you know, his parents became a lot more accepting of it.
Yeah.
He experienced some level of success. And like you said, it's like he's been doing it now like 12, 13, maybe even 14 years. I got to like look back at the timeline. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's a very hard journey. But like you said, the like media in general, but like I look at film as a very powerful tool. Like that's I wish I was able to create film, but like I look at movies like for example, as you were talking, like American History X. Um, it's a great movie about kind of, you know, obviously like a neo-Nazi and like his like how he reformed himself, and like because you saw in the movie him talking to people other than like kind of the people he was in his little bubble of kind of neo-Nazis, and you know he became friends with an African American, and
Yeah.
he tried to reform his brother as well. And a great movie in general. And
Yeah.
like you said, if you were trying to tell that to somebody kind of in like an instructional way or like educational way, people would probably kind of glaze over it. But then when you tell it in like a human way, it's
Yeah.
like people still learn the same lessons, but it's more digestible. So yeah, I definitely agree with you that film is kind of a great tool for that. So we touched on your labor movement leadership. We touched on your film, like your acting career. Now there's another kind of part in you as well, which is you do plus size modeling. And like you said, you've been appeared on CityTV's Fashion Friday segment
Yeah.
multiple times. So, you know, there's another question later about like how do you manage your time to do all these things? But for now, how did you get into modeling? Like what's your interest behind that? And also like tell us a bit more about kind of the body positivity movement as well,
Mhm.
what that entails.
So I think like growing up, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism at a very like young age while I was in school, and I gained 80 pounds in 1 year, and how had all these hormonal imbalances and mental health concerns, everything, depression. And people didn't know what was wrong with me because hypothyroidism was not something talked about at that time. I had to drop out of school from UofT, take a semester off, and come back into to school to like figure out how to finish my degree. And with that came a lot of body shaming that I experienced, right? In family gatherings, in the community, people made fun of me, but that didn't stop me from dancing. That didn't stop me from engaging in cultural shows. Like I still continue to do it because my heart was like really there. But it did lead to eating disorders. So I would do like binge eating, and then I would go on these extreme diets where like you're drinking like these slimming teas and like all kinds of stuff, like just drinking water or like some kind of a tea for 3 days. I went on Dr. Bernstein, was on Jenny Craig, like you name everything that I have done. But I was battling, like it was so bad, my body dysmorphia. I would wake up at night and like touch myself and cry because I thought I was growing overnight. And it was so bad, but I would never talk about it with anybody because there was no support system for this. And this eventually going into social work and sort of like unpacking this part, and my sister-in-law who kind of said, hey, listen, there's a casting call for plus size modeling, why don't you go for this, right? Like for me, I was already on TET. I was already getting so many criticism from people as well. People will see me and be like, oh, you're so pretty, but if you lost weight, you would be prettier. Oh my God, you have a great face, but you could just kind of lose some weight, right? And all kinds of like comments that people thought were compliments. I think, I don't know. So I wrote a Facebook post called "Am I Pretty for a Big Girl?" And that Facebook post was picked up by Tamil Culture, and then they asked like if I can sort of elaborate on that, right? And then when I saw this casting call, I said, sure, why don't I go? And then I went and connected with Toronto Fashion Academy, finished their modeling course because got selected. I walked on runways. I got published on a magazine. And then call came from CityTV for their fashion segment. So I think I've been on don't quote me on this, probably approximately 9 or 10 episodes right now. And I built, a great, and again, going back to it's building relationships, how you are on set with the producers, with the host, and showing up on time. It more than the talent, it's all about the work ethic and how you build relationships. So it kind of like allowed me to, kind of come out of it. And I am going to say this, like I think like there's a lot of unpacking for our community to do when it comes to body image and body positivity, body inclusion, because the first thing most of the time with Tamil people they say is either they comment on your skin color or they comment on you're either slim or you're either gained weight. It's sort of like that's the first thing they say. I don't know if it's coming out of awkwardness or it's something cultural, but I think we have to start unpacking or calling that out and say like that is not appropriate to comment about my body, because I think we are actually damaging the self-esteem of like teenagers and young adults and children, and it's leading to eating disorders and severe mental health issues, right? So I think that's something that I want to address through like me living as a body positive model or a curvy model. I still go to the gym. If you look at my Instagram posts, you will see, but I go to the gym for more of health reasons because it builds discipline, builds patience, and like weight training for your joints and your muscles. If I have to walk on the runway on my heels, I need my legs to function, right? So it has all these other meanings besides weight loss.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. do it for the young creative in you. Definitely, I think like you hit it on the nail. For some reason, there's a huge focus on like skin color, like like so many kids I know. Um, my parents, strangely, maybe I just ignored it, but like, playing in the sun, like don't play in the sun, you're gonna get dark. Like
Mm-hmm.
they sound like innocent comments, but like they have long lasting impacts like later in adult life where like I know people that still kind of try to avoid the sun because of
Mm-hmm.
like kind of what they got exposed to at a young age. And like you said, the whole body image thing. So and that's something I'm very conscious with my kids as well, where sometimes older people, like again, I don't think they mean ill intent. I think it's just something that's kind of been conditioned and it's almost unconscious where if they do make comments, I'm very conscious about kind of correcting them at times or
Mm-hmm.
being very not vocal, but like in a nice way about making sure they come correct with their comments essentially. So I
Yeah.
definitely get it.
I
Uh,
think like briefly what I want to say is that those comments do come from colonialism because before colonization, if you look at the Dravidian blood, it was very dark skin, rich, and our women were curvy. If you look at the temples and the sculptures, right? And then the Europeans came in and we wanted to strive to be lighter skin, looking like them. And also there was mixed babies, right? Like my skin tone is not Dravidian blood skin. So we know there was mixed somewhere. So I think we as a Tamil community need to start talking about decolonization and colonialism and the impact of it because we are so torn by the war. We haven't recovered from that trauma that we don't see what happened to us before that, being under the rule of British, Portuguese, and the Dutch, right? And it's this like this violence. And we can see that in Canada, living here, like firsthand what is happening to the indigenous people and sort of like how that has seeped into our daily lives as well.
yeah, I guess another thing, like as you were talking, you kind of mentioned earlier, and like obviously naturally kind of as a social advocate, you have to be outspoken and maybe say things that aren't popular or accepted or like things that people want to hear. From when you started that journey to now, because obviously you're much like you're older than when you started, like, it's been like 10 years or whatever it is. Have you seen an evolution in yourself? And like, I always think about this question because I feel like sometimes people get stuck on who you were, especially people that knew you from the past, even though you might have evolved. So they say, yeah, they hold on to like the past version of you. So have you ever kind of had to deal with that issue of like, especially I know when I was younger, I was definitely I was vocal about things, but not like in like, I don't know if polish is the word, but like not like in a way that was conducive to like progress. So yeah, just
Mhm.
curious about that thought process as well.
Absolutely. And I think like I had to code switch when I went to work because I was seen as like the ghetto girl from Scarborough, like, so the language that I would use, the slang, if I wore hoops and like high boots and like, all of that like came into play, right? Because they were just like, oh, like you had to tone it down so to make the other people comfortable. And mostly other people was like white people to be comfortable, right? And code switching happens in every like community, visible minority community. And I think like for me, I have definitely changed the approaches of like how I communicate. And the reason, and I think I do see a lot of young people like me who have the passion and who do have the right values and the right intentions. But in our community, nobody teaches us how to manage your emotions. So, for example, if there's a trigger, how do you respond? We either do it through, if you look at, let's see, I'm going to say Vijay TV, like look at the way like how that runs in every Tamil household, silent treatments, really like horrible language, and like women portrayed as like the evil people or who stay at home and like, cause politics, all of that stuff. So I think like the media and plus what we are exposed to as a refugee community that's exposed to like responding with violence and kind of like, being so direct and everything, it all plays a role. So I think me kind of removing myself from those circles and kind of like and going to therapy. I have gone to therapy, like, I'm very pro therapy, and in terms of like, because as a social worker I also need to have a therapist for me to understand what are my triggers, right? So kind of unpacking those things And I think at a point a very angry teenager as well. I was a survivor of an eating disorder, a survivor of child sexual abuse, which my parents didn't know for years, and they were broken when they found out, right? And they didn't know how to deal with it. Survivors of an abusive relationship, dealing and dating a violent gangster, like all of these things were bottled up, right? So I wanted to come out, I wanted to call out things because I knew where I was coming from, but I didn't have the right tools and languages because, like the society says, I was a ghetto Tamil girl from Scarborough, right? So it kind of, the elitist people didn't want to associate with me, you know. So I think, yeah, like I can definitely resonate, like, you know, with that kind of journey with a lot of people. But I did have to sometimes code switch for the other individuals to understand me.
And you talked about, I mean, we kind of highlighted just before that question, kind of the actor side of you, then like the plus size model like journey that you're on. I remember that you released this documentary, like it was a teaser or like a highlight video, or like a promo video
Yeah.
about the struggles of kind of the Eelam Tamil women.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I was really looking forward to kind of the release of it. So I guess number one, like what made you even decide to kind of take on this project? And I guess when do you plan to release the documentary, if at all?
I'm glad you asked this question because I'm going to be very blunt and honest with you. The struggle to get this film made is like unbelievable. I have spent, I would say, like over 50,000, you know, just getting this film made. While I was in Sri Lanka in 2017 as a leadership facilitator, you know, for 3 months, I saw like the unpaid labor that Tamil women give, and even during our struggles. The unpaid labor that they had to give and they continue to do to rebuild the communities, the emotional labor, the physical labor, which is never spoken of, right? And so I wanted to highlight that. And then when it was named as daughters of Eelam, of course it was turned into you know, twisted by a political agenda, and to say like, you know, this is a film that is, you know, like talking more about putting a negative you know, thing around the politics there and all of that stuff. So which we said, okay, fine, you know, it's not the name, it's just like, you know, we want to highlight the thing. So it was changed to Thamaragal. And we did try to relaunch it again to do fundraiser. But the thing is that it is a woman made film for women. But if you really look at it in the Tamil Canadian community, the most of the businesses or where the money is, I really don't see it among like distributed for women owned business or the women created films. And it was very hard for me to get the funding for it. And because people just weren't really interested in like sort of, you know, seeing this come to fruition, I guess, right? So there was a lot of struggles with that. I'm not saying they're not willing, but I think there's a lot of education needs to be happening. And I'm not at those tables where the old boys clubs having whiskey to ask, Dave Machan, give me some money to fund this film, you know, like, so I'm not there. And I understand. So I think there's a lot of evolving that needs to happen. And number two is the safety of the subjects. Because they're talking about the community work they're doing, the activism they're doing. When I filmed it, it was a different political party that was under the leadership. And then when it changed, and when I launched the fundraiser, I was contacted by army generals from Sri Lanka through Facebook, trying to reach out to people I know to get my number, even though it is just a film about women's struggles. And it was just spinned. I think just our existence as Tamil people is so political that we can't even tell our stories without putting our lives at risk. So I think the question right now is that it's like, you know, my safety and also mostly the subject safety who live there in Sri Lanka is under discussion right now. So I can give a date for the release. And but that is the, you know what, this film is the journey of the film is the story of our people.
And is there like, I guess since you have like an opportunity when this episode comes out, is there something that you're looking for from the community, like in terms of monetary or like any other kind of support, or is it just a matter of just waiting to release it?
Oh, absolutely. Like if someone comes and says that, listen, like we want to see this film come out because it is a film that the world needs to see for sure. It is a film that is documenting our struggle to hand it over to the future generation to see, this is our people, this is your story. So definitely, if someone comes forward and says like, let me get this film to the world, let me get this to stage, absolutely there's an opportunity to to get it out. And I think that's where we're stuck with the funding.
Okay, well, hopefully somebody listening will step up to the plate. And I think as we're kind of leading up to this recording as well, recently, I think you were named a recipient of the UofT Scarborough Alumni Awards as the 2023 Inclusive Excellence Award, which is really around recognizing alumni who demonstrate outstanding commitment and made significant contributions to the areas of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So first of all, congrats. And number two is like, what does this award mean to you?
Thank you. I think it's a huge win for the community for sure, because I want to highlight that at one point that our activism and advocacy work were seen as terrorism, but now it's being celebrated and awarded by one of the prestigious universities in the world, right? And so I think it is a huge win for the community, that I would say. I might be like, the platform that is receiving it. However, I wouldn't be receiving that without me telling the stories of our people or working with them and actually using, the strength and the resilience that the community holds, right? That's in my DNA and it's in my blood. So, I didn't expect it. It just came as a surprise. And so for sure, I'm looking forward to it. But I think this is sort of opens the door for women from refugee communities and immigrant communities and people of color to say, like, your story matters and the work that you do. And also for people to believe in community work, collective work, because we are a matriarchal society before colonialism. We worked as a collective. That's why I was co-founded the BIPOC Collective, where all of us shared the power. So there's not one person that holds the power. So I think believing in community and community work and funding community projects is something that I want individuals to focus on.
We kind of talked about this again leading up to kind of our conversation here today, which is you are working on multiple careers in parallel. And especially in the Tamil community, you must confuse people because, like you said, one of the common questions asked, I think just in general, is like, what do you do? I guess, how do you handle this? Because I know most people are kind of used to kind of a linear path. And for myself personally, I love to explore different interests and do different things. Like I'm an engineer by trade and I work on a software company, but I also have this podcast, which is a creative thing. And I think people always get confused why I'm doing the podcast. Cause for me, I don't make any money. It's really just, I love doing this. I love sharing stories. I like talking to interesting people. And some people understand that, but I think most people are just confused about why, if I'm doing this, why am I also doing this? If they don't kind of correlate or if it doesn't make any money. So I guess I'm just curious how you handle it, because you're working on so many different things. And like you said, it's not things that are typically quote unquote accepted or something that's kind of cheered on in the Tamil community. It might be changing, but
Yeah. So I think if you look at my Instagram, my social media, it's all just for professional. I don't post anything personal at all. I don't use the social medias for personal use. And I think when people from the social advocacy part just kind of check in or Google me, they're like, oh my God, do you have a different life? There's a different personality and a life happening. But for me, they're very connected. I feel like I was always in a love triangle, but with social work and media, and it's very connected in the back, right? It is who I am. And I feel like, when you are an actress or you're a plus size model or you're doing something different and you get the platform, you get the mic, it's like getting the mic is what everyone wants. But what are you going to say when you get the mic? What are you going to say when you get the stage, right? So I think the social work and the social advocacy, social justice has given me the knowledge and tools to use this spotlights or the stage that I get to advocate for people and tell the story of my people and also advocate for equity seeking groups, right? So I think what people have to understand is that, when you go into media, why you want to be an actress, why you want to be a model, is that when you get there, what do you want to do? What is the change that you're looking to create? right? And I think if you're grounded in that, it's your all the failures and the disappointments, everything are just like that's part of the journey. That's part of the journey, baby. Like, because you enjoy the moment, like you enjoy this is a journey, and you won't be focused so much on the destination.
I 100% agree. Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free? For me, it's like, for me, when I look at opportunities, I'm always like, I'm not looking to, like you said, I'm not doing this podcast to get opportunities or something else. If it happens, great. I'm
Yeah.
always looking at how do I do things that I'm just by doing them, I'm already winning for myself personally. So for me,
Yeah.
it's like you said, you enjoy social work, you enjoy acting, you enjoy modeling. So by doing those things, you're already winning. If you get other things
Yeah.
that come out of that, it's great. So
Correct.
it's like I think a lot of people, like you said, make the mistake of let me do this so that I get to this. But then when the
Yeah.
thing doesn't happen, they're unhappy during the journey. But if you're winning or you feel like you're winning on the journey, when you get to the destination, it's great. But like you're not like, oh, it's got to come today. It's like it'll come when it comes, but I'll enjoy kind of the steps there. So I fully agree with that as well.
And it's a blessing to find your passion and being able to live it, because for like there are people I meet that are unable to find what they want to do, and I my heart aches for them to that when people wake up every day and they don't know what their purpose is and why they're doing what they're doing, and they are unable to live it. So I feel like my parents have done the sacrifices, my community has made those sacrifices, my people have made those sacrifices. So for me to have this life, I'm blessed, you know. So if you do have the opportunity, whoever's listening, to live the life that you want, go and live it.
And so that's a good segue into reflection time. So if you had a chance to go back in a time machine and visit 16-year-old Sumu, what would you tell her?
So I think like there are two things, because I actually wrote down some of the points that I wanted to share. That two things. One is how to take criticism from people. I wish like my parents and mentors at that time taught me, because as a teenager, and especially from a community that is very opinionated and very strong when it comes to when they share their thoughts, to look at who is giving you the criticism, what is their lived experience, and what is their credential, if it is academic criticism related to academics or criticism related to your body, who tells you to lose weight but they have no understanding of like how to eat healthy, or they don't go to the gym and everything. So looking at the person who's giving the criticism and assessing their credibility to if that the criticism is valid, it was mind-blowing for me, because after that I was just like, okay, I just say thank you, I'll think about it, and I just brush it off before I get so angry and be like, how dare you speak to me, blah 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 blah, right? But then later I just realized, no, like this, I'm not going to take this, right? And then sometimes I come back and I tell that person, hey, listen, I give thought to what you said, but I really don't think I'm taking that advice, right? So how to take criticism was a huge game changer. And also how to manage your emotions, which I shared like before, right? The emotional shutdown, the silent treatments, lashing out, all of those things really impacts your mental health. It disturbs your peace. So I think like, especially when I'm in the social justice sector, if you're going to address racism, you're going to experience racism. If you're going to address sexism, you're going to experience sexism. So whatever the advocacy work that you're trying to do, you are going to be exposed to more of it, right? And if you're addressing poverty, you're going to see poverty. How do you manage your emotions when you experience those triggers and those situations? So I think emotional regulation, self-regulation, those kind of things I would like to teach that 16-year-old.
Yeah, I love your especially the part about who's giving you the advice, because I see this a lot with people where it's good to hear multiple perspectives. I'm maybe on the other end where like I used to listen to everyone's advice. Now it's like I'm pretty like not stubborn, but like I try to cut out the noise, but I do know that it is good to get other people's like perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people a lot like advice is going to come better from people that have a relationship from you with you, like or like that they have some kind of loving relationship towards you, whether it's friendship, familial, whatever the case is. So like when people that don't know me give me advice, I do exactly what you do, which is I smile. I'm like, sounds good, but it's like I would never give advice to somebody that I have no idea what their lived experience was, because my advice could be very generic, and there's a lot of nuance
Yes.
to people's lives. So I'm like, I would never give advice to somebody unless they ask for it and then give me
Mhm.
more context. So I just want to kind of share that I agree with
Yeah.
that. So we looked kind of looking back. So now looking forward, like in terms of the future, in terms of your personal legacy, in a few sentences, how would you want to be remembered by your friends and family?
I think I'm living that right now. Social advocate and artist, or artist and social advocate, doesn't matter, how people see it. It is half and half. So I'm very blessed, to live that right now. So I think that's how I will be like remembered. But also somebody that who likes to laugh. Like I laugh. I have very dark sense of humor, sarcasm. So, when we're hanging out together with like friends and family, we do laugh a lot because of the type of work I do. It just, you do realize that life is so precious, and you do have to have a sense of humor to navigate these difficult situations, right? And so you won't internalize it. And so I think laughing, and I cook really well. So hopefully they will remember me for my cooking because they love to eat. So I think it's just, a person that they love to be around, and left some sort of a change in this world, right? And I think that is itself is a huge blessing.
Before we kind of go into the last part of the podcast, a question that kind of comes to mind is like, because of the work you do, like you just kind of said, it's often you deal with like dark situations or like serious situations that there's no laughing matter, but obviously you have to try to make the best out of it. When you kind of experience all you have personally and also seeing it like in other people's lives, and then when you deal with whether it's friends, family, or just in general, you hear comments about people complaining about what seems like the most trivial of things. How do you kind of address that? Like, do you just kind of play it off, or I'm just imagining like kind of like the work you kind of deal with, you must see some
Mhm.
really like people in some really bad dire situations, and then you hear people complaining about, I don't know, the type of car they drive or some other thing. I don't know. So
Mhm.
how do you address
Oh
that?
yeah, I know. So when you mean like when I hear first world problems, right?
Yeah, I guess
I
that's the best way of asking it.
First world problems. Yeah, I know. I hear what you mean. So like they couldn't find their Lululemon yoga pants today, and that's
Yeah.
a huge crisis. I know. To be honest, people come from different walks of life. And I think like as a refugee kid, I used to be very angry at privileged kids because it's like, your parents have RRSP money that paid for your entire education, and you don't even finish your degree. And I'm here sitting paying my OSAP, right? But I think at the end of the day is that's their journey. Not all five fingers are the same, and they get to live. But I think at one point things switched where people wanted to know, like here today, I'm being interviewed by you. It's like people wanted to know my journey, right? Because who wants to hear saying, like, this is another point where at one point in my journey, all I was reading was books from like these LA white rich men, and I wanted to be successful overnight. I bought all the books. I would say I would spend about 100,000 just in the past like decades just to to figure out how to become successful, until I saw my lived experience is completely different. And this wealth came from generational wealth of like colonization. And I can never be them. And the thing is, because I don't have the same lived experience. And I think when I change that perspective, when I listen to those comments, I'm just like, I'm very happy for them, because why would you want to wish someone to go through trauma, right? That's not something that I want to wish on anybody as a social worker. But I am going to touch on something that usually Tamil women, I don't hear Tamil women speaking, is the fantastic friendships that I have, a sisterhood. Because I think we are not given that opportunity or taught from a young age to build friendships with other women who become your soul sisters. And I have that within a group of social workers, a group of Tamil women, and people that I grew up with that, who survived the gang violence and who are here today. And I don't post about my friends on social media, but I think who is your support circle to fall back on? So like, you heard a privileged comment which you couldn't address about somebody who went to the cottage and their boat didn't work in the work meeting, but you can call your homegirl and be like, guess what I heard today, right? So I think like having that support system definitely helps. So I would encourage like, young women to foster those friendships.
Love it. Well, now we'll segue into the final segment of the podcast. It's a fun game I like to call Creator Confessions.
Okay.
It's basically, I'm going to say a bunch of statements and you're going to tell me the first thing that pops to mind. Ready?
Yeah.
Favorite Tamil food?
Kutrati.
There's a fire in your house and you can only take two things with you. What are they?
My dog and my photo albums.
Something that scares you.
I think right-wing individuals with extremist views do really scare me.
Insecurity you have.
The insecurity is that again, the code switching, like I experienced before.
Favorite TV show you're watching?
Right now, Sopranos.
A place you're itching to travel to?
Greece.
Fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to?
Maitri Ramakrishnan.
Favorite childhood memory?
I would say my dad was an ice cream factory general manager and eating ice cream from there.
Oh, I would have loved to do that. Something you like to do for fun outside of work?
Girls' nights.
Favorite movie of all time? It can be Tamil, English, or both.
Kaka Kaka, Surya and Jyotika.
What's something you could benefit from caring less about?
Other people's opinions.
What is something that you splurged on in the last few years that you have no regret about?
Ferrero Rocher Tornado from D-Spot.
What is that?
It is crushed Ferrero Rochers in a soft chocolate ice cream.
Oh,
in D-Spot. Yeah, it's really good.
Try that. Okay. Who would you love to have on your invisible council? So essentially somebody whose life experience you can kind of tap into at any moment, when you're running into a situation that you need advice on.
Oprah Winfrey.
What's a pet peeve of yours?
I think pet peeve is there's a few. I'm thinking. I think people who don't flaky people. Flaky.
Agreed. If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
A regret. No regrets. Actually, you know what? Maybe the film of like Tom Riegel.
Celebrity. Okay. And celebrity whose life you'd want to experience for just one day.
Jennifer Lopez.
What's a book you read or a podcast you've listened to that's had an impact on you?
A book, Lessons in Chemistry. It talks about feminism in the 50s, about a one woman in the chemistry field.
A belief, behavior, or habit that's improved your life.
Finding joy every day in something that I do.
And finally, a piece of advice that you would give to your fellow aspiring Tamil creators out there.
Focus on the journey and not the destination.
Love it. Well, that's kind of a good way to wrap up the podcast. Thank you, Sumu, for kind of jumping on and sharing your remarkable multidisciplined kind of journey. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that kind of want to be doing what you're doing, but they're stuck in kind of the traditional path. So hopefully this sparks something in them. So thank you for jumping on. If people that are kind of listening to this they find some kind of motivation or they want to just reach out to you because you've inspired them in this conversation, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Instagram, they can look me up, Sumu Sathi. I mean, you'll tag me anyway, so they can send me a message there.
Awesome.
I'm happy to chat. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Sumu. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
On to the next episode.
Thank you, Ara.